So we gotta make sure we're live. All right, we are on. Okay. So good morning, everyone. I'm Deanna Firo. I'm your 4th District School Board candidate for Richmond Public Schools. We are now having the second portion of our community conversation. If you tuned in last time, originally this event was scheduled for August 22nd. And unfortunately for unexpected events, our officers that were invited to the panel conversation were not able to attend, but they were able to reschedule with us. And we are now having that second portion of the conversation today. The first two speakers, Marc Schindler and Valerie Slater, were emailed the invitation. So should they come in, they will be allowed to as listeners today. Also, before we get into the conversation, I just want to remind everyone that this is not an endorsement from the Richmond City Police Department nor the officers who are here. This is a community conversation related to the potential removal of SROs from Richmond Public Schools. So if you have questions and you'd like to participate in the conversation, you can drop your questions into the comments section of our live feed. And when we get to the Q&A, we will try to address those questions as best as possible. If there are answers that we do not have at the moment, I will forward those to the officers, and they will try to get those responses to you as soon as possible. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome Officer Ronald May and Captain Faith Flippo from Richmond Police Department. Thank you for being here with us this morning. We do have this very important conversation that is happening in the city of Richmond and specifically in our schools right now, and that is the proposal or the mention that our superintendent has decided to make a recommendation to our school board members, our current school board members, to remove SROs from our schools. There have been several community conversations and public comments submitted to the school board, and seems to be that sometimes the comments that are submitted are focused very much on how adults feel in the buildings and their experiences with SROs. And we just want to make sure that we give an opportunity to the community to ask questions to you directly. And I'll be very honest with you, in my own personal experience, when this issue came up, I first was very nervous about the idea of removing SROs because I thought about how my experience working in schools as a public school teacher had been, and my interactions with SROs in our building. I always thought, of them to be very positive. And then I had to start doing some research, asking questions, and finding out, why is this a consideration? And after several weeks and months of looking into this data that is available, I feel that, yes, I think that this should be considered by the board, and it should be approved to remove SROs from our schools. But I am diligently asking of the school board members and the community to demand a plan that will show how the school board would intend to do this, what that process would look like, and the timeline to do it in a way that is actually effective, sustainable, and will still ensure that our students have safety and security, and that our families feel safe and secure sending their children to school. So with that, I will allow Captain Faith Flippo to introduce herself and mention her role at Richmond City Police Department.
Good morning. I am Captain Faith Flippo. I'm the Commander of Community Youth and Intervention Services, which I supervise our Community Care Unit, our Police Athletic League, our HOPE Unit, our CAPS Unit, as well as our School Resource Officers. I started my career in 2002, where I was a patrol officer in Wickham and Mosby Court at 1st Precinct. And from there, I moved on to forensics, then went to Southside at 2nd Precinct and was promoted to sergeant. And after some time there as their FMT supervisor, I moved over back to major crimes, where I was a sergeant of youth and family crimes, where I got to see, unfortunately, a lot of the crimes that our kids are victims to in the city, and worked with school resource officers then with the crimes that would occur where kids were either kids assaulting kids, but the majority of those cases were kids being victims of horrible crimes. From there, I went on to be a homicide sergeant, then got promoted to be lieutenant and went back to Southside as a sector lieutenant of 211. And then went back after a few years as a sector lieutenant, went back to major crimes and was the lieutenant in charge of forensics and youth and family crimes, and then of homicide. And since have gotten promoted to captain in January, where I took over community youth and intervention services. So.
Thank you. Welcome for being here.
Wow.
There you go, Ron.
Mine's going to be a lot shorter.
And Lauren,
you got a lot more to say.
Our next speaker is Officer Ron May. Would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, Officer Ron May. I'm actually from Los Angeles, California. I was actually raised in Watts. Wife raised in Compton. So that's kind of West Side Story right there. You don't cross the line right there. Before I got to the police department, I was actually a teacher for 8 years, high school teacher. So I know exactly what it is to deal with youth and at the same time deal with police officers in schools, because I was actually raised with police officers in the school there. I was in the Marine Corps. When I came over to the police department, and let's see, I got out here in 1994. I've been in the schools since 1997. So I was at Armstrong the whole entire time until approximately 6 years ago when I moved over to Martin Luther King Middle School. So I've been dealing with the kids an awful lot, and I've been in First Precinct my whole time. So in First Precinct, you had Wickham Court, Mosley Court, Fairfield Court, all Churchill, Fulton, all those. I've known so many of these parents. Matter of fact, a lot of the parents have kids that go to Martin Luther King now, who I used to deal with. So not saying anything about my age, I actually get kids together. We coach football, softball, track, basketball. I've done all those with the kids in the schools because we do want to get the kids off the streets and have something for them to do instead of just going home and playing PlayStation, something like that. A lot of the kids will get in trouble like that if they don't have some type of structure to it. And that's my main goal, is to work with kids like that.
Well, thank you so much for both of you for being here. So we'll go ahead and get into our questions, and these are some that had been submitted prior to today's event and prior to August 22nd from the public. And then for our viewers that are watching right now, if you would like to submit any questions to the officers today, you may do that. Just drop it into the chat section. If you have a question that is specific to either one of our speakers today, please make sure to mention that in your question. Captain Flippo, one of the questions that came in was actually a two-part question, was how have RPD and RPS historically determined which schools would have SROs and which would not? I'll let you go ahead and answer that portion first.
Okay, and Ron, I will, Officer May, I will let you also intervene if you know, just because you've been a part of that program for a long, long time. But generally, SROs came about for a connection to our community, but also it morphed into school security as well, keeping the area safe. So a lot of the times we realized the need for SROs in a school from the calls for service that have already been generated from that school. So as we reassess, we realize maybe one school's getting a lot more calls for service. We decide that might make more sense to put an officer there, put 2 officers within that school to help alleviate your beat officer to constantly come to one location and pull them off the street, when we can put a school resource officer in that school, and that can help with a lot of the response times, but also with the need that area needs.
Exactly.
Okay. And one of the second portion of that question was that the community feels that the intent of the program originally was to build relationships between the local police officers and schools, students specifically. So if that is the case, why haven't we expanded the program to have officers in all of our schools?
So that was actually something we were already in the midst of doing before the pandemic occurred in October or in January. We actually, and I'm hopeful, I was hopeful on this, but we were working on getting an officer in every middle school and 2 officers in every high school. And that was something that we were working on getting grants and having, we were very much in that process of, a lot of the times we have to consider is, with police work, staffing is at a minimum. You know, it's just, we got to balance having officers on the street, having enough officers for that, and then also having enough to be in other, you know, be in our investigative unit, to be in, you know, our mounted or canine or whatever specialized unit. So it's a balance of where we can put our officers when staffing is an issue. Currently in the temperature of the world the past few years, you know, getting retention for officers and keeping officers and just keeping ourselves fully staffed, it's always going to be something that we have to work on as a police department, as any police department. So when staffing is low, they're not going to, you know, it's going to be harder to put those officers in just one location as the school when they're needed possibly on the street when there's other violence that's occurring. So it definitely is a need. It's something we've wanted to do and we've strived to do over the past few years. And I will say we were aggressively making measures and we're in a good position this year that we felt we would be able to staff that finally. And then, you know, and then COVID hit and then the civil unrest hit. So it's a little bit different now.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you. And Officer May, your question is, do you think that a relationship between the law enforcement and the students can still be achieved? Can there still be a relationship built between just the police department in general and the public without an SRO program?
That's going to be really hard to say. It depends on which area that you actually work in. I feel that myself, my own opinion, that it's not going to work that way because most of the kids are used to us in the school anyway. A lot of the parents come up to us almost every day that things happen in the neighborhood. I mean, they'll get over there and turn around and ask us, look, my son got into a fight over the weekend and now they're trying to bring it into the schools. So a lot of times we deal with a lot of outside issues in our school. And that's because with the help of some of the parents there, but then some of the parents do not want that type of help. And, you know, some are for us, some are against us. But the things that we try to do, like I try to do in my school, is my main goal is to follow these kids all the way up to, like I'm in the middle school now. I will follow the kids who I try to work with all the way up through high school. Even when it comes down to taking SATs, I go over parents' houses to make sure paperwork's together. I make sure they're getting into college or have a job and what they're going to do after they graduate. Because if you just turn around and say, well, what I'm going to do is I will see you this year and then you're gone and I'm just going to say, okay, bye, do your own thing. That's not going to work. So you have to keep that with the kids in mind that, yes, you have someone to talk to just in case.
And if I could interject with that too, if that's okay.
Of course.
I think it also falls into with a patrol officer. And I mean, I am going to brag about our patrol officers because of all the programs my unit does, the community care and the outreach, and we do great stuff. There's still officers in the precincts that come up with their own programs and they find families in need and they do great things to help out an individual in the community. However, when you're answering radio calls, I mean, sometimes I remember when I was at First Precinct, you know, if I didn't pack a lunch, I wasn't eating a lunch because you were going from call to call to call and you didn't have time to really develop much of a rapport with somebody because as you're writing a report with one call, next call comes out and then you're moving to that one. And, you know, especially in First Precinct, the calls for service were high enough that you didn't have much opportunity to really connect with a kid like Officer May was just talking about. It's hard. I mean, I know that there'll still be plenty of situations where officers will reach out and engage the community in a positive way. However, you just get so much more of that when you pull an officer out of answering calls every single day and put them in a school where they can, one, answer the calls and the needs for the families that belong to that school, but also just really connect. Like Officer May was saying, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that's exactly what he does, because I see when we're on the street with somebody and they reach out to him and they're laughing and carrying on. I'm thinking, how do you know this kid? You know, and come to find out he was a student of mine 10 years ago. And so, you know, to remember that, you know, do you remember an interaction you had with someone 10 years ago? I mean, a lot of us wouldn't. And I think that bond is so much different. It's just like when community policing started in the 70s and in the 80s. I can say my father was one of the first people. He was a law enforcement officer in New Jersey, and he started off as a walking beat. That was his sole job when he first was hired. And we would go back to my hometown, because we hadn't lived there in many years. We would go back and we'd go into a store, and someone would say, "Oh, hey, are you such and such?" And he'd say, "Yeah." He goes, "I remember you from 40 years ago." So that's the community policing mindset and how that affects someone. They didn't, it's a positive interaction. And times when he had to do his job as a police officer, he did it. But at the same point, they recognize that bond and that, that the care that the officer had for that community member. So it's going to be, it scares me if that happens, because it's going to be a lot harder. And I think all it's doing is hurting our kids. But I mean, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, because exactly. Just this past, a month ago, June, I was invited to a barbecue. One of the kids who I've been knowing since he was actually born. I had 4 people in that one family, and I had each one of those kids in my group. And the last one just graduated from Armstrong and going to college. I kept tabs with each and every last one of them all the way through high school and some of them through college. So you want to keep that with these the kids that's coming up. And good example, like I have a young man who was in my band. He just graduated from Bethune-Cookman, got a full ride. He lives in Fairfield Court, got a full ride to Bethune-Cookman. He just graduated last year, and I literally flew up to his graduation and took pictures and everything like that. So.
And so, Officer May, I will ask you another question kind of similar to this. Some of the, I lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. Oh, okay, we'll go ahead and move to another question. It's early and my coffee's not kicking in. So if I remember, I'll come back to that. But I'll go ahead and open up a different question. And just real quick, we did have somebody who asked what school you were at. And so, Officer May, I'll go ahead and let you just mention what school you're at and what does that look like, your experience at that specific school, if you'd like to talk about that.
Well, right now I'm at Martin Luther King Middle School, and we have a great staff over there, security and teachers there and principals. We are basically on one accord right there. We're trying to get these kids to graduate. And I love these kids. Matter of fact, kids will have a problem during the weekend. They will come in my office and talk to me that sometimes they won't come and talk to their parents about or anything like that. And a lot of these kids, unless it's really serious, hey, this is between me and you right here. And then I try to give my suggestion on that. And I say, look, my door is always open. But a lot of these kids that we deal with there, like I said, we keep track of them. It's not like they talk to me and I turn around and say, give them some advice. I go back and check on those kids. So these kids do very well. And like I said, the principal's on board with me. I have no problem with the principal, Ms. Dabney. All the assistant principals are with me. I've been knowing them for years. The kids, I hate to say it, I've been knowing their parents because they were part of my group also. So my main concern is to try to teach these kids there is a way out. You don't have to turn around and say, well, hey, I've been living in Fairfield Court all my life and I want to get an apartment there. My job is that, look, there's life out there other than your own neighborhood. So I try to instill that in their mind right there. And it actually works. Because I've had kids that were in Martin Luther King and Armstrong, they're actually teachers now. Just like the gentleman I flew out there, he's a music teacher at Martin Luther King now. So I love it.
I remembered my question. So I know that the General Assembly over the last few years and in other states as well, legislators have been trying to make sure that the roles that SROs play in our schools are very defined, and that there's a distinction about, where do they step in and when do they not. And some of the data it implies and shows that sometimes SROs are kind of called on in moments when it probably should have, it could have gone to a counselor or social worker in the school, or even a matter of discipline that could have been taken care of between the principal and the parents. So In your experience, have you ever felt that maybe you got called upon to take care of a situation that you felt you did not call for an SRO? And if you are ever in those positions, what do you do to avoid to step in a disciplinary system to not overstep that?
Well, basically, that's when you have a meeting at the beginning of the school year. And then if it starts going a little further, you have another meeting like with the head security person there. I get together with school security. I get together with the principals. And I turn around and say, okay, you know my role here. This is my role right here. If it gets to the point where it has to make some type of arrest, I will step back. And then if I have to make the arrest, then I will do it that way. But we don't, at Martin Luther King, we don't just step in and, you know, throw somebody on the ground or that sort of thing. Yeah. But they know my role when I'm there.
And that's how all of our SROs are. I mean, we have standards, we set standards, and that's why we have supervisors in charge. Is we know what our officers are allowed to do, and our officers are fully versed in what they're able to do. We don't enforce kids just being in the hallway. That's not our job. That's why you have school security. That's why you have teachers. There's a lot of things that people will get this misconception, to include staff members sometimes, of, well, the officer needs to do this, and that's not it. And that's why we have a lot of training with our SROs to make sure they're aware of what they're able to do and what they're not.
And in your training, what is the expectations as far as like the visibility of officers throughout the day in the buildings?
Oh, we're there the whole entire day. And like I said, the kids see me the first time when they get off the bus in the morning. I'm right there at the front door. When they leave, I'm right at the bus on the back door. You know, we do have some concerns there because at Martin Luther King, as you know, there's no fence around the school. So that means you have folks from Mosby Court just able to come right down there across the track. And my goal is to keep these kids safe. When they see me there, I make sure my police car is back there. A lot of police cars usually in the front, but the good part about it, we know where to put our police car to deter a lot of the problems. So my police car is always in the back. And when these people think they're going to come across there, or when school lets out, Raz lets out, or Armstrong lets out, they know they are not to be on the property right then and there.
How do you communicate that to the community, like the boundaries of school property? I know I've heard some stories from former principals of Richmond Public Schools that there was a time when even one specific principal, I won't mention her name, but she said that she had members of the community that would try to come in to use the restroom. So how do you educate the public to let them know what the boundaries are if we don't have, like you said, we don't have some fenced in schools? So what kind of communication do you give out to the community for that?
Well, if we see them, we have a radio. School security is on one end, and then if they let me know there's a person that's actually on campus doesn't belong there, I will go over there and just talk to them myself.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So we'll kind of shift gears a little bit here. Some of the concerns of the public is about the funding, and Captain Flippo, I don't know if she stepped away there. Hopefully she's hearing. There you are. Thank you. So the concern is about funding. And so in general, the public right now is saying, you know, you've heard the term defund the police. And in the definition, it means, you know, some people are defining it as reallocating money for programs like SROs back into schools. So can you explain to the public what the funding process is for SROs? What does your department have to go through? And if SROs are removed, where would that funding go if they're not needed? You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Let me see. We can unmute her. Let's see. There you go.
Yes, okay, it wouldn't let me unmute for some reason. Okay, so funding. Yeah, so Richmond Police.
We're on mute again. Sorry.
Unmute.
There we
okay,
go.
How about now? Okay, so the Richmond City Police Department absorbs the cost for school resource officers in the school. It's always come from our budget and from our officers. If the removing of SROs happens, that funding gets absorbed into officers on the street, and that's most likely where school resource officers will go. They will go into answering radio calls, or you know, it just gets absorbed that way. So it's not like that money is now going to get put aside somewhere else. And what scares me about even these conversations is, you know, let's say we try it for a year to not have school resource officers in. That now those group of officers, those 13 that I have assigned to that area, will get put elsewhere. And then let's say a year or two later, we decide, holy cow, that was a big mistake, and we have a dire need to get school resource officers back into school. Once we've done that, that's going to be a lot bigger shift, because now we're talking about pulling that many officers from precincts and from areas. Currently, I believe, and don't hold me to this number, I believe we're at least 50 officers deficiency right now in for our staffing. And I unfortunately, I would think it's only going to get worse at the present time. And so when you have 10, well, right now we have 12 officers. When we have 12 officers that are going to be absorbed elsewhere, they will go to where those other vacancies are in the street, and it's going to be a lot harder to pull them back, to put them back in a school. So the funding, just the mindset of thinking you're getting rid of a school resource officer, so now you're going to have all this extra money to go to something else. That's not the case, because it comes from our police department, and it's going to stay within our police department, and that money will just get absorbed to staff our patrol officers.
And so, like many things that are grant funded, that are funded by the state, and just like us in education, teachers like myself, we have to provide data all the time. Every year we have the standardized tests, we have SOL testing. We also do different assessments throughout the year to keep track of student growth, and even things like attendance is something that we submit to the state. What kind of data does the SRO program collect to show that it's effective, that, you know, that you're improving the student's life? What kind of data is collected on a regular basis? And even where can the public find that data?
So to be honest, I'm not 100% sure as to what exactly is collected. I know, so what we generally do is monthly, we have meetings with our command staff and with our partners in the department. And we talk about, information gathering. We talk about all the efforts that our officers are doing, and the arrests that have been made. But a lot of it is more of, the influences that we have with officers. So some of it is really, it's going to be hard to collect numbers on relationships with individuals. That's something it's, that you're not going to have numbers for that. Ron's not going to be able to, Officer May's not going to be able to truly give you the stats on how many families that he really interacts with on a daily basis. What we do is each school resource officer is responsible for teaching one class in their school, and then all the after school programs that they do. Majority of our SROs are coaches or assistant coaches. They come up with other programs. They teach all kinds of safety classes to the students, on top of the police athletic league, when those same students are now in summer camps where the SROs are guiding them. So, how do you collect data on things like that? Except we know numbers of what officers are teaching, what classes they're teaching, and their contact with that. That's more of the response that that we can give when someone asks about, tell me about what you're doing in the school. Yeah, you can look up how many reports an officer makes. However, it's not going to show the true. It's not going to measure the true daily duties of what an SRO does. And there's not funding right now. I mean, the funding, like I said, comes from the police department. It's not through grants. And if a grant was succeeded in was approved for the future that we were talking about with having more officers, it would just be the guidelines of whatever that grant needed. But again, it's hard you don't measure that. And that's not the purpose of an officer, to be in the school and to see, all right, how many arrests did you make? How many reports did you make? That would have never been a measurable thing, necessity for something like that.
And then to keep on that one, like Captain Flippo was saying, we actually go into the classrooms and teach the school about gangs. My favorite class, when we teach class action, there's certain things that I like to tell these kids that you can get in trouble outside, like in the neighborhood. Like we teach them what simple assault means. There's a book that we pass out to the kids that show simple assault can give you a certain amount of time if you have to go to court, sort of thing. So we try to get them to understand that disorderly conduct, simple assault, larceny, things like that, you can get certain time. Matter of fact, it's even in there that you can get your driver's license suspended. So I've been doing that class action class for years, and I really like that class right there. I pass out the books, I actually let the kids keep them. They can take it home to their parents and they can look at it, look through it. Well, I didn't know that. I even have kids stand up and we do little skits. And I tell one kid, like, go outside. Okay. Well, these two kids are in here fighting right here. They're play fighting. And then the other three kids in there start hooping and hollering and things like that, talking about hit them, hit them, hit them. That can be considered inciting a riot. The kids can be charged with assaulting each other, disorderly conduct, but the people who are turning around saying that hit them, beat them up, and starting inciting a riot, that's actually a felony. These kids did not know that. So it's good that we're actually teaching these kids in the classrooms also.
Mm-hmm. And for our viewers that are just coming in, I see a couple of people are joining us on Facebook Live. Just as a quick reminder, this is an opportunity for you to ask questions to the officers who are here for this portion of our community conversation about the potential removal of SROs from RPS. At the end of the program, I'll say it again, my opinion on this decision. But if you have any specific questions for either one of the officers or just a general question, please share. I did notice that somebody put kind of a comment, which is not exactly a question, but it does bring up a good question. And that is, for the students that your program is not necessarily designed for, like you were saying, you're trying to educate students about, issues that happen in their communities and crime and to stay out of that. For some students that are not in your radar, there have been conversations about how they feel like they are being criminalized. Some students even feel that having the metal detectors in their school, and not even in all schools, makes them feel that they are criminalized before they even walk into the door. So how would you address that? How would you talk to students who feel like that and don't interact with you on a regular basis, but see your presence and feel as if though they are being criminalized and expected to break rules?
Well, I actually, like I said before, I usually go to every single class there, and I talk to each one of the kids and let them know what's going on as far as that. Now, the metal detectors, again, I feel that's very much of a good idea because, as I said, there's no fences around the school. You have people coming up to the school that don't belong there. Some of these kids don't know how to deal with situations where someone gives them a weapon outside the school and say, well, just hold this for me, and then come, bring it off in the school. It's mainly for safety, and I can understand that. Really, it's not to try to get the kids in any trouble or anything like that. We want the kids to go home safe and feel safe inside the schools.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so now that things are going virtual, our schools are going to be starting on September 8th virtually. And either one of you can answer this question, what role will the SROs play this year while we're in virtual learning?
So I will answer some of that. I'll tell you, so the end of last year, it was, and that was unique, or last school year, I should say, and that was unique for all of us. So I'll start off with how our SROs handled that at that point. And I can attest to several of our SROs, if not all of them, were doing constant contact with students that they had already had a relationship with. Hey, how you doing? They FaceTime them or their families often. They would, one Officer Ruffin posts workout videos at his school. And, that's his kind of after school activity he did with kids. So now he was at least posting virtual videos to connect with the kids, and they were aware of that and hope were participating. We would have conversations. We try to virtually connect as much as we could. And our SROs at that point were a part of the feeding, the meals that they distributed. They would be there so they can at least have face-to-face and keep that community connection with the families. What this year will involve, a lot of our staff is still sucked into the civil unrest that's happening in the city. But, if we can get all of our school resource officers back to being, away from this other assignment, the goal was to have them in the communities where their schools are and to, check on kids, to have conversations like, hey, what can I get you? One of my, two of my school resource officers are out there right now in our Spanish community getting information out, because we realized that the Spanish community wasn't 100% aware that we're going all virtual this year. Now that's not a police department thing at that point, but however, we see it as a need. So, just yesterday we were out in the Southwood apartment complex giving out book bags and having conversations with families to say, this is what's happening. So, that school, isn't going to be in session. The bus is not coming to pick your child up, on Tuesday. So, we really have filled in whatever need there is, and our SROs are trying to do that. They're trying to continue to focus on juvenile crime and keeping our kids safe and just being in that community. Just the past few weeks, I can say at least the last 2 months, we've had a juvenile either involved in a crime or victim to a crime or shot or killed. And it's heartbreaking. It's happening at least once a week in this city. And we have to do something about it. And I think taking our school resource officers away from engaging our youth is only going to make things worse. So, when things are virtual, it's going to be a matter of we were just going to continue to stay as involved as we can with the community and with our families. And that's our plan ultimately, is to just get officers out there in the communities where their students were, and just continue to engage as much as they can.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hear a lot about what you're saying and how it sounds that police officers are kind of filling in roles that are lacking, or positions or assistance and help that is lacking in schools. That leads me to this question. If the school board does decide to remove SROs, what do you think would be the best way to go about that, to make it be done in an effective way? Can that be done? I
don't have an answer. Yeah, I don't know, honestly, because I don't think, I think in the other conversation we spoke about, do we agree with having mental health workers in schools and all that? And absolutely, if you can increase the number to the other resources we can offer to our children and to our families, absolutely. However, taking police officers out of those schools to do that, I think that's where the issue comes into hand. And I don't know how to successfully keep our kids safe within a school without having your school resource officers there. I don't have a solution to that. And I don't know, Ron, if you can speak to that too, but I really don't.
Yeah, well, I was actually around when they took the officers out to schools back in 2000. Mm-hmm. And it was a serious bad move, because now, again, like Captain Flippo said, they're putting the patrolmen more work, because apparently every school, for some strange reason, they were calling police almost every day, because something's going on at the school. Now, when I got to the school, I got there right after Armstrong had that shooting where a teacher got shot and a secretary got shot at Armstrong. I came in September, and the good part about it, there was a resource officer there in June. Now, can you imagine what could have happened if that police officer was not there? It depends on where the police officer is when we get the call, because it has to go through the person has to call, then it has to go to communications. Communications has to log it to us. So that's a little time lapse right there. When you have the officers already in the school, you're there to deal with it. They took us out to school, and next thing you know, everything just blew up. Mm-hmm. So they put us back in the school. Was it 2003? I think it was 2003, 2004. But there's a lot of times you have in one school, you have Creighton Court, Fairfield Court, Wickham Court, Churchill, Fulton, some are Southside, some Highland Park, all in one school. They have their own little cliques. They get to fighting a lot off in there when they know for a fact there's no police officers there. And by the time we get there, it's just a big melee. So even if a fight starts in the school, the officer is there, and you can turn around and stop something from just totally spreading. By taking the police officers out to school, that's going to be a very bad move, because then you're going to have kids scared to come to school because somebody threatened them on Facebook or something like that. Now, like I said, I try to teach these kids that are there, and it's the truth. You can tell me if I'm lying or not. There's 4 things that these kids will get arrested over, with something that they shouldn't. I try to teach these kids that every class I go into, I said, and it's over some he say, she say mess, over some boy or some girl, he or she gritting on me, looking at me all funny like you want to fight, and social media. Those are the main 4 of them, even when they're out on the street. the kids get arrested over. I try to teach them, hey, don't fall for this right here. And that's what's going to happen if they take the officers out to school. The kids are not going to come to school because they're going to be scared to come to school because somebody's threatening them.
So in comparison to other schools, other school divisions, but just specifically really other schools that don't have SRO officers, that aren't using that program, and don't feel it necessary to have an SRO officer, what is it that they have that our schools don't have? And what are we not doing? What are we lacking in our communities that you see requires us to have SROs, or you feel requires us to have SROs?
They don't have all the projects in one school.
I think a lot of the times too is, you know, it doesn't mean that. I mean, we have school resource officers in Powhatan and Chesterfield and Henrico and a lot of the areas surrounding us that, you know, they serve a little bit different purpose in each community. However, it's not, you know, these aren't seen in other communities. They're not seen as this negative response. Our officers in any school, I mean, my children have school resource officers in their school, and they say hi to the officer, and they engage them in a positive way, and then they go about their day. It's not where this stigma that we're saying, you know, officers are immediately going up to somebody, patting them down and doing all that. I think a lot of the issues too of what we're having, and I'd like to know what area doesn't have school resource officers that you're talking about. But in a lot of the incidents that I think were cited at previous school board meetings and stuff were negative encounters they had with school security. And I'm not knocking school security. However, I think we need to recognize the standards that we have for our police officers. You know, we have internal affairs, we have standards that our officers go through with training, we have mandates. We also, on top of what our officers go through twice a year with their use of force training and how to de-escalate, and how we have CIT training, which is crisis intervention training, which is how to talk to somebody that might be having some kind of episode or you know, might be struggling with mental illness. We have all of this training. On top of my sergeants, the SRO sergeants actually put their school resource officers through training as well. Before the school year starts, they talk about, what's our main issues? How do we protect our kids better? What happens in a school shooting? How can we respond? But also, how do we handle certain situations? How do we handle fights? How do we handle teacher disputes with the student? So, you know, we have above and beyond training, and we're well-versed in, you know, how we handle situations with kids. So when, you know, it breaks my heart a little bit when these accusations come out that we're just, you know, patting down kids as soon as they come into school and get accused of certain situations that happen. Then it's not even us that's doing it. Now, one of the suggestions that we did put out there was maybe our school resource officers need to have a softer uniform, you know, polo and BDU, still have your equipment that's on you, your gun belt, but maybe something that can distinguish us from our school security. And again, I am by no means am I talking bad about our school security. We all are, I believe, trying to do the best we can for the situations we're in. However, you know, we have officers that a lot of my SROs, this is what they've always wanted to do. They've wanted to work in a school because they came from Richmond Public Schools. They saw the need, and they also saw the benefit of having a school officer in the school. They truly, truly care about these kids and want to be in a school because they see the benefit of keeping them safe, but also having a relationship with them. I don't know. I mean, what schools are you citing that don't have school resource officers?
Well, just even in Richmond, we have some schools, specifically like more of our specialty schools. And I know that some people feel like those are entirely different, but of course, in these schools, there are also students that are attending there that are coming from some of these neighborhoods that, you know, they are coming from schools where they did have SROs. And so why does that transition over from one day having one in your middle school and then switching over to a specialty school that no longer has it? If we, you know, like we were talking about earlier, that the goal is to expand that relationship with the police officers, with the community. But just in general, even in other schools, their experiences are, like you were saying, that officers serve differently in different communities, where some students almost never see SROs. I've had experiences like that. Where we, you know, even in my own experience growing up, the officers did appear every once in a while in the school. They did certain presentations, they spoke about things like that, but very rarely were they ever seen. So just in general, what is it, you know, can we imagine getting RPS to a position, a place where we would not feel the need to have an SRO? And if we do, what would that require? What would we need to improve on? What would we need to fix in our communities and in our schools to get to that point where we can all confidently say, yeah, we don't really need the SROs in that case?
For this day and age, I can't see how. Because like, good example, we've had more, over Martin Luther King, we've had more parents come to school trying to start fights with kids and going off on secretaries in the schools when they give us a call to come over there and deal with it. And a lot, like I said, a lot of things are coming from on the street into the schools, and it's not going to stop doing that. And I'm really concerned about that right there, because I love these kids. I've been, like I said, I wouldn't have been in the schools this long if I didn't love what I was doing as far as that. Like these SRO officers, after it's time for them to get off work, they're actually coaching football. Like I coach Martin Luther King's football team there. And we do it on after school hours and on the weekends when football season is here. When they have the football games, the high school football games at night, you have the SROs actually working the games. Like when I worked Armstrong's football games, I made sure I was at the front gate. I wasn't inside the school. I was at the front gate saying, okay, no, you can't come in because of this situation right here. You're already suspended. It's on the paper, that sort of thing. Or, hey, you already got smoking weed right now. I'm looking right in front of you and everything like that. You can't come into the games doing certain things. I'm at the front gate trying to keep everybody safe on there. But I don't see any change as far as that anytime soon.
In a perfect world, sure. You know, in a perfect world, officers would only respond to calls and answer, answer whatever situation or try to resolve whatever situation they're immediately getting called to. And we wouldn't be carrying the many hats of other systems that might have failed students or teachers or whatever. In a perfect world, absolutely. Unfortunately, we're not in a perfect world, and situations that Officer May was just talking about are very real and around everywhere. It's not just in Richmond schools. And like I said, I'm completely okay with school resource officers being in a school where my children would go, because I think it's, God forbid there's a school shooting. That alone is worth the finances put into any school to at least stop another minute of something like that happening, something horrific like that. We forget some of that. I think, we get a little too comfortable with how things are, and we realize that those unfortunate situations could still possibly happen. And I don't want to wait the 3 minutes response time that at best is going to take, because at the time you call 911, it takes about 3 minutes to get to the officer. So dispatch plugs the call in, and then it comes out, and then it gets dispatched to the officer that's on the street. And then we're just hoping that officer is close enough to get to that location. So even if there's a fight happening, so now we're talking 4 or 5 minutes, 6 minutes going on before that 911 call, or after that 911 call is made, before you're going to get anyone that's even going to be in that location. And I'm not willing to risk that with my child, and I would hope that no other parent would be willing to risk that either. That's too much time for my kid getting pummeled on or punched or beaten up on, or yet alone where there's other kind of violence with knives or guns. I won't. And I'll give the example of, and Officer May, if you can correct me if I'm which school. I thought it was at Huguenot that our officers there was a situation with our Spanish, with a few Spanish kids, that there was a stabbing that occurred earlier. There was a fight that happened with some MS-13 members, and then school resource officers were able to intervene to stop those two gang members from coming into the school. And when they stopped them, they found a knife on them, and honestly believed they were coming to that school to stab the child at that moment. And it was a gang-related situation, and officers were able to jump right in and solve that problem right away. And a lot of the teachers in that school and staff members, when we've talked about it, they remember that very vividly about what happened. And it's situations like that. Like, so maybe someone wouldn't even realize that even happened. A teacher's not going to recognize that. Your school security isn't going to recognize that. And a mental health worker or a caseworker, social worker is not going to recognize the crime that was happening in the community and how that folds over in your school. So something like that happens, and a school resource officer is already in tune with what's happening in the community of their students, because we talk to each other in the police department, and is able to keep an eye out if something unique is happening. And amazingly enough, that officer did exactly what he was supposed to do and intervened and stopped something horrific from happening to a child.
Right. And good example on that. our sergeant sends us things that happen overnight. But I also go, when I first come in, I go to the first precinct. When I go pick up my car, I go to the first precinct, talk to the sergeants on duty, anything that I need to know about happened the night before, because I really want to know. Like, good example, just this past school year, something happened where an adult got into it with some other adult, and it was over at the store, and he pulled a gun out on him. Well, I went over to the store, saw the picture of the guy. What a coincidence, that very next morning, while the kids were all out there, he comes walking across the school. Well, guess what? I stopped him. He actually had a gun on him, so I arrested him right there. And this is just his past school year on school property. And just by getting the information ahead of time.
So tell me the solution to that. How does, when you pull an officer out of a school, what happens in those situations? And these aren't two that happen once, each year. These are, goodness, I would honestly say it's almost a monthly thing in our schools that this is happening. So how do you solve that? How? And I know we've talked too about how do you have, we talked about the relationship our SROs have with the students, and then we said, well, then why don't we just teach all of our officers to have that kind of rapport with students? Well, again, I've told you about the calls for service that happen in a lot of our neighborhoods, and how busy officers are and how they don't have that chance. And also, I sent you stats about the crimes of our juvenile offenders. That 1,500 crimes in 2019 where a juvenile was offender of some sort of violent crime, 1,150 where the juvenile was a victim. So 1,150 incidents where a juvenile was a victim of one of these crimes. Unfortunately, just because you're under the age of 18 doesn't mean you're an innocent bystander too. So, let's say we have one child that is potentially rather violent. Now they're in a school with other kids that aren't rather violent, that are these kids that we talked about that are the ones that are truly innocent, that aren't deserving of being in a situation that has some violent members. And our SROs are what balance that gap. And we unfortunately we have to keep an eye out for some of the violence that's out there, and also protect our kids that aren't the violent ones. And a kid that has maybe a violent history, our ultimate goal is to try and help that child to come out of that. We have programs called the Life Program in the city of Richmond right now that works on just kids mainly that have some kind of weapons law violation, that have had some sort of violence with a gun or with a weapon, and we work on trying to get them out of that mindset. To let's see what we can do to change your way of living if you're thinking guns are the answer. And sometimes it's when they're at Bon Air correctional facility. Sometimes it takes for them to be into a detention for this to work, but we still have programs that we're working on to try and change that mindset to get someone to understand what's the right thing to do and what's not, and ultimately where it protects you too. Because even as a violent offender, ultimately the solution to that is jail or death, and we don't want any of that for a child. But we have to recognize what crime is out there, and having an officer in your school is what intervenes to help that. I just maybe it's been I can't even begin to think that the communities have been shielded to not realize what happens in their schools. I mean, I think we know what happens in our schools, and having an officer there that can, one, address the crime that's in the area, but also, work on ways to better everyone. Because aren't we all just here to try and just continually to get better, to better our lives, to better everyone else's life? Like that's why our officers are there.
And see, I had the honor of doing both. As I said before, I was a high school math teacher for 8 years. So I'm gonna tell you right now, the job I have now is easier than teachers. Teachers have it hard in there. They're trying to—
You're telling me.
I'm telling you. I
know.
I have done both of them. And I turn around and say, well, what we need to do is we want to teach these kids. We want to get them to pass the SOLs. But it's very hard to do that if kids are scared to tell someone who's disrupting the class, hey, come on, I'm going to learn this or whatever. They're too scared to tell them because they're scared what's going to happen to them. So when we get in there and start talking to these kids right there, everything kind of slows down a lot. I mean, some kids are learning, a lot of the kids are learning, but then there's someone that needs a little more. Like, good example, I'm in there also, I'm tutoring math to these kids also. And the good part about it is that when the people that we're going to be dealing with, hopefully, as Captain Flippo was saying, while school's out, we possibly can go out there and help them math, because a lot of times parents don't know the math. How are they going to learn if the parents can't teach them that? Because I know my father, he tried to teach me the math. He gave me some stuff and it was all wrong when I got back there. But I'm serious. These parents, a lot of these parents don't know it, type of thing. My main goal is, like I said, get these kids to graduate. Get these kids away from their own environment so they can learn how to deal with different folks. Because I'm going to tell you now, there's a lot of kids that only deal with Black folks. They have to learn how to deal with white folks also. So you go to these different schools and you just straight from the Black neighborhood, you are very uncomfortable at these colleges. And I've got more calls from that, from Shawan College, Bethune-Cookman, even some of them in California, who's actually been there. And one of the things that really hurt me was that there was this young lady, and it's always been in my mind, this happened back in 2000. Girl is at Armstrong, straight A student. I tried to get her away from her environment. She decided to go to Virginia State or whatever, but of course she sees the same people who she graduated with, that sort of thing. She makes it all the way up to 6 months before graduation, end up getting pregnant, and end up getting killed because of the boyfriend. Yeah, and that just hurts my heart. She's buried over there in Oakwood. I go and visit her sometimes, things like that, but it hurt me because I tried my best to get her away from this type of environment. There's nothing wrong with going to a school like Mary Washington or something, there's nothing wrong being embarrassed like that. That's not embarrassing. That's giving you a step up. But like I said, I've been a teacher. I've been on both sides. Teachers have it harder than police officers. I mean, I'm so happy I don't have to do any more lesson plans. You just don't know. I type like this. That's it. I don't do that. That's how I type. But I'm telling you right now.
Well,
yes, that's how I type. They tease me every day about how I type. I'm sitting there hours away just doing a regular paragraph. That sort of thing. And then, like I said, with my music program that I've been working with, I started with 9 kids. Do you know, last Christmas time, we had something like maybe about 60 kids. And they're all volunteering. The alumni always come back. I play with the Richmond Concert Band. Some of those adults come and join and play with the kids. Like I said, we do a Christmas program every year. It's televised. My goal is to try to get them on PBS, but it's on public access right now. That's my main goal right there, that they would do a Christmas program every year. That's my main goal. I'm hoping it works out that way. But when we do our program in the springtime, we always have a theme. I teach these kids that there's more than just hip hop music. So the first time we did our program, I had them do classical music. They didn't know what in the world. I said, yes, you're going to do classical music. Next year we did show tunes. They thought they were doing a Flintstones. I said, no, you're doing something from Sound of Music. You're doing something on Poor Damn Bed. You're doing something on the Roof. I mean, and the funny part about they remember everyone. We did jazz one year. The jazz came off really well because they thought they were doing a new jazz. Oh, no, you're going to do something from Sammy Davis Jr., Mr. Bojangles, things like, who's Mr. Bojangles? I said, you have a big statue of Richmond. You didn't know that? No. Well, the song that Sammy Davis Jr. sang, who's he? Oh man, I'm getting old now.
Well, thank you so much to both of you. I can tell that you're very passionate about your work and what you do in our schools. And our viewers have put in some good comments and put some general questions. I will direct those because we want to not be on too long. But thank you so much for sharing all of this and answering the questions. I will just end on the note that what it sounds to me like is that this is a bigger issue that needs to be dealt with the whole city. And I think we should all be encouraging our school board members to be working and talking to our city council representatives, because we're talking about and you can correct me if I'm wrong or if you think differently, but it sounds to me that we all want to get to a position, we all want to get to a place where our schools will not feel the need to have SROs, will not need to feel like there are these threats coming into our schools, like you were saying, issues that happen out in the community feeding into our schools, but that there are a lot of missing pieces. And I think Captain Flippo even said there are some systems that have failed our children that we need to talk about fixing. So I don't think that we're not going to solve it today. This issue has been not just an issue right now, but it's been an ongoing issue for many years, about how people feel with the relationship with police officers. So I really am, I want to be in a position where we have our schools not needing SROs, but we need to see a plan. We need to see what that's going to look like. We need to talk about all of those other pieces that make our community a safe place. But I don't think that we're hearing enough about that in the from our leaders in the city. So hopefully our superintendent will provide some sort of plan of what that's supposed to look like. Did any of you have any closing comments? Or
my only thing is, and I guess it's a question, is if the ultimate goal is to provide a better environment for our students, and it seems like we're all wanting that. We all want our kids to be as safe as possible. Why? What would be the benefit of pulling out SROs from a school if the ultimate goal is to make sure they're safe? So yeah, absolutely. Up the social services, up the resources to those kids. Absolutely. But still, why is I do not agree that the ultimate goal is to remove school resource officers from the school. I think that's not it. I believe the goal should be to improve all of our relationship with each other, to see that, between community and officers, that we are a team. It takes one team to solve things, to create a better atmosphere for each other. So I don't think the agenda for pushing school resource officers out of a school would ever encourage that that common theme of let's work cohesively together to make life better for each other. So I think that's still ultimately pointing out this negative response for officers. And I think that doesn't promote peace. That doesn't promote things like that. I think having us, maybe let's promote a better understanding for everyone, for each other, and see what other deficiencies exist, and let's fix that. But I cannot support the mindset of, even in the future, to get our officers out of the schools, because even if we get in an environment where officers aren't needed to respond 80% of the time to situations that happen in schools, that 20% of an opportunity where some kind of violence could happen to a child, to my child, I'm okay with an officer being in that school and having a positive rapport with those students. So, that won't, I'm sorry, and that won't be my goal
and Captain Flippo, let me also share with you, in the conversation that we had with the other speakers that appeared, one of our questions was, did they feel that we should be doing this as a drastic sweep, like an immediate sweep? And I see your little one back there. That it should just, no, it's fine. I'm a parent. I know exactly what you're feeling. I've got my child waiting for me on the couch. But I just wanted to say that the speakers that were with us last time, one of the questions that came to them, and for our viewers, if you want to see what was mentioned from the other speakers, that is available, and I will repost that for people to see. But one of the question was, do you think that this should be done as an immediate sweep, that if they decide to pull SROs out, that it should just be done overnight? And they agreed that no, that's not what they felt, because like you said, there are a lot of missing pieces. There are a lot of points that need to be addressed before we can get to a position where we can start talking about removing SROs. So and I don't want to put words in their mouth. I really encourage everybody to see and hear the speakers, Marc Schindler and Valerie Slater, say it for themselves, saying that there should be a process to getting to a plan that would address all of those other issues that are causing these disciplinary issues happening in our school, that are causing these outside threats coming into schools. And so I just want to make sure that the public understands that even that myself, as a member of the community, I'm not pushing that it would be done drastically, because we have so many other parts that we haven't even talked about. We have a broken disciplinary system in general in Richmond Public Schools. We have misalignment of how the security guards respond in relation to our student code of conduct. And even our student code of conduct needs to be reviewed to how those processes and procedures in it are actually being implemented. So we have a lot of work to do, and that is why I'm trying to really encourage the community to pressure our school board members to ask for what that plan would look like before they get to a final decision to just immediately remove SROs. And I think Officer May, you were saying that you've seen it where it was done without a real plan, and we don't want to repeat that. We should be looking at that experience as a learning lesson so we can get to a place where we can say, okay, if we are going to take this on and we are going to remove SROs, we've done all the work, put all of our safety and securities systems through a real process of scrutiny, and we've even done a full crisis assessment, threat assessment of all of our schools, and gotten them to a point where they are ready to pull back from having so much of a need or reliance on having SROs. So I just want that to be clear. And the platform for our viewers, I just want everybody to understand that in the essence of what my campaign is and what I'm running and the type of school board member that I'd like to be, it's about talking about these things. We've had very few experiences where we're actually giving everybody in this issue a moment to talk. And I hope that I've done that, and that you have felt that you've had a fair opportunity to say, you know, your experience and your opinion about the SRO program in RPS.
I'm beyond grateful for the opportunity for us to talk. Go ahead, Officer May.
Captain Flippo basically said what I was going to say, so she messed me up over here with my speech over here. But one thing I would really love to add is we need to get these parents more involved. That's one of the biggest things over there. A lot of these parents are turning around and say, well, if they do this to you, I want you to beat that, you know what? And that's the way they were raised, and they're trying to raise their children right there. I've had meetings with parents and kids on each end sitting around. We had the meeting at the RRHA office because we didn't want them to say, well, we had it over in Mosby Court or something like that. So we had it at the RRHA office, and it worked out really well. The parents that were there on both sides agreed to the same thing. This is crazy. So we need to get these parents a lot more involved, because I think that's the biggest issue right now. It's not really the kids. It's the parents. Is what's happening when they leave the school. They leave the school and go back home to the same environment that the parents are teaching them there, but then they come back to school and expect to just do a flip just like that.
Yeah, and that's true. And that's true. I do feel that whatever decision that the school board takes, that we still encourage opportunities to have our police officers build relationships with our community members, because what we don't want to have is people feel that they can't call on the police officers as the resource for safety when an issue comes up. And I think sometimes we do have that. There's a fear of that. So I want to make sure that we work collaboratively and as a community to still ensure that, people learn, our students learn, our children learn that you are a resource and here to serve and protect. So thank you so much to everybody who's been watching, and thank you to our other speakers who were who spoke on August 22nd. I will repost that conversation so people can see it. This one will also be shared both on our YouTube page and on the website, and here on Facebook for everybody to come back and talk to. So I hope that this experience, this community conversation, serves as a model to our current school board members, to our superintendent, and to our city council representatives who are kind of staying quiet on this topic, but I'm going to be persistent to get them to chime in, because this is a whole Richmond City issue that we need to be talking about. I hope this serves as a model that productive, constructive conversations can be done, and we can get to a place where we can talk to each other and collaborate and build the kind of community that we all want to live in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.